From the Crown Uptown Theater in Wichita, Kansas, welcome to the Kansas Sports Hall of Fame.
First of all, I want to thank Jordan for staying after it, because I have always regretted having conflicts when he's asked me to do this. This is the sort of thing that I live for. I love sports history. I am something of a sports historian myself, and to just follow up on a couple of things Laura and Jordan said, the history of sports in this state is something that is really exceptional. This is not one of the most populous states in the country by any means, but if you go back and look through the names of the people that are in this Hall of Fame, I will put these people in any sport you want to pick up against any state in the country and the kind of history that has been created in this state. So it's a great honor for me to be part of this and to be the one that gets to introduce this year's class into the Kansas Sports Hall of Fame. It's a very diverse group and comes from a lot of different backgrounds, involves a lot of different sports. You'll see a couple of themes. There are some of these who started important traditions at their respective schools. There are a couple of inductees who proved themselves at more than one sport and were significant in multiple contributions. So it is a tremendous class. Our first inductee is a name that all of you certainly know. As far as any qualifications as a player, George Brett would meet the criteria for any Hall of Fame, anywhere, anytime. If you just look at the numbers, the accolades, the awards that he won, there is no question. Not only is he one of the greatest players of his era, but would certainly be in the conversation in any discussion of the greatest third baseman in the history of the major leagues. But a couple of things I want to say about George. One, how hard he played. I don't think that any member of the media, any fan, anyone who took their kids ever came away from a Royals game feeling like they saw anything but the best George Brett had to give on that particular day. And from a personal standpoint, a side that you may not know as well, during the years that the Royals were coming to prominence in the late 70s and early 80s, I worked for Cake TV and radio, and both stations were Royals affiliates. And so Bill Land, who was the sports director at the time, and I would take turns going up to Kansas City every couple of weeks to bankroll some interviews, and we'd go out at the beginning of batting practice and get as many as we could. And it was a great group of guys to work with. There were some tremendous interviews that I will always appreciate, people like Paul Splittorff, Hal McRae, Frank White, Dan Quisenberry. But George Brett was the most visible, highest profile player on that team. He was a superstar, and he was always accessible, always cooperative, forthcoming, funny, humble, and because of the way he was, he set a tone for that entire team and the way they responded to people and the way they carried themselves. And it was a delight to cover those teams during those years, not only for their performance on the field, but the kind of people they were to deal with. I can tell you, with all apologies, Jim, covering a couple of playoff series in Kansas City, the Yankees were a totally different animal in those years. So I would suggest to you, and also in the way he represented himself, the organization, the city, and the game of baseball, that George Brett always carried himself with class and as a Hall of Fame individual, as well as a no-brainer Hall of Fame player. I get to be the one that's the bearer of the bad news. Unfortunately, George, up to today, had every intention of being here to accept this award, but this being the final day of the regular season and the Royals being in a situation where they have some very important decisions to make about the team going forward, called a series of meetings starting today that everyone, including George, who is still a vice president of the team, had to be there for. So unfortunately, you will not get to hear from George this evening, and all of us very sorry about that. So we move on, and our next inductee is a state product who stayed at an in-state school and put together a tremendous career. KRISTI Kloster-BURRITT was a 1991 graduate of Bishop Miege High School in the Kansas City area, won 5 individual state track championships in high school, went on to the University of Kansas, and won 4 800-meter conference titles, outdoors and indoors, set an 800-meter record in 1996, winning the indoor NCAA championship, becoming the first female track and field athlete at KU to win a national championship. If you get a chance to read the bio in the program, this came a year after she was taken down by a strange illness that took a while to diagnose, and for all intents and purposes at the time, looked like it might be the end of her running career. And she comes back and wins All-America honors and wins a national championship. Virtually all of the people being inducted tonight are already members of some other Hall of Fame, many of them at their institution, and she is one of those, member of the KU Booth Hall of Fame, and now a member of the Kansas Sports Hall of Fame, KRISTI Kloster-BURRITT.
Hello. Oh, gosh, sorry. First, I'd like to thank Jordan. From the first time I spoke with him, and I thought he was a telemarketer, he's just been wonderful, and this whole event has been wonderful. Laura, thank you as well for keeping our Hall of Fame, and to all of the board members and inductees that are here and not able to be here tonight. I really appreciate this. I'd also like to thank KU Athletic Corporation, who apparently, unbeknownst to me, nominated me for this, thus me thinking Jordan was a telemarketer. I had no idea it was out there, specifically Candace Dunback, a former teammate. This word means a lot to me, growing up and running for Kansas all these years. But to be inducted into this Hall of Fame with my personal mentor, Bob Timmons, and all the other Kansas greats means a lot to me, so I'm very thankful. And in all honesty, I have 3 kids, and this gives me a little bit of credibility. They're going to think I'm cool for like 2 days. And I do coach a couple of them in tracks, and I may listen a little carefully this spring, so we'll see. Obviously, I'd like to thank God. He's the one who gave me this odd mix of fast twitch muscles and endurance so that I could have the diverse and successful career that I had. Our head coach, Gary-Sweeney, my coach, Steve Guyman, and Bob Timmons, who actually was not a coach at the time, but Guyman was working with me, and he knew I wanted to win nationals more than anybody. But this compartment syndrome, I didn't get to run a lot. And so Bob Timmons knew it was my last chance, and he would meet me at 5 in the morning at the pool, and then again at 7 at night. And Coach Guyman would give me workouts on the Aerodyne bike. And the week I won nationals, I only ran 4 miles. So these guys I'm forever grateful. Also, Scott Ward, Scooter, who's a sports psychologist at KU. He worked with us all to make video or audio tapes to listen to prepare for our races. Probably the only NCAA athlete in history to have to listen to Yanni before races, but I was a little hyper and intense and needed to be brought down. So he was very, very thankful for him. All my teammates, cross country and track is a very family sport, and especially Kathy Palacios Vasto and Melissa Schwartz Shively pushed me to be better and were there for me when I was laid up with my legs cut open again. All my friends and my 4 siblings, which some are here tonight, always made signs for me and cheered. And one of my brothers told me tonight that he would get so nervous before I ran. So thank you to all of them. Now, my husband, I'm very lucky. I met him when we were 18 at KU. He was a football player, and he was with me every step of the way. He, even as a freshman in college, drove down to Oklahoma to see my first Big 8 championship and watched me beat a 5th-year senior who was not happy with me. And he was there when I won nationals as well, our 5th year. So, Jason, you've supported and believed in me for 26 years now. Thank you so much. Couldn't have done it without you. And my parents. Was adopted. So, first of all, I want to thank them because I did have a relationship with my birth mom who told me that she would have never let me do athletics. It's unladylike and you get hurt, which I did, but she was from the South. So my parents obviously supported me, drove me to everything I wanted to do. And they supported me in a gentle way. They taught me intensity and hard work and to be compassionate and be a good teammate. But my mom may be a little too gentle. She told me one time to let another girl win because I always won. And she thought that it would be nice of me, since I had strep earlier that week, to let that little girl win. I did not. My dad was very happy. My dad was my coach in many sports, basketball. All 5 of us he coached in basketball. He really did teach me to be tough, to always work your hardest and put your best foot forward and to support your friends and teammates. My mom and dad are not here tonight. My dad is fighting end-stage metastatic prostate cancer, and in his illness and battle, he has shown me again what a warrior he is and how important it is that while you're fighting and working hard, that you be kind and compassionate and caring. And I owe this so much to him. And Dad, this is definitely your award too. I wish you could have been here. He definitely ingrained grit into me. Yesterday he told me that he wished he could be here more than anything, and he was so proud. And I'm proud of you too. So thank you so much for this, especially at this time in our family's lives. It's very positive and uplifting and very important. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Kristi. Our next inductee, Charles Goose Dowdy, is a native of Oklahoma, graduate of Langston University, but spent most of his professional career coaching in Kansas. He succeeded a previous Kansas Hall of Fame inductee, Lafayette Norwood, as the head coach at Heights High School in 1978. He led Heights to 6 state tournaments, won about 2/3 of his games during his time there, and coached such standouts as high school All-Americans and future college stars Antoine Carr and Aubrey Sherrod. He also coached tennis, and not as many people may be as aware of that. He coached at Heights, Southeast, and Friends University, and he began a summer program at McAdams Park that introduced literally hundreds of youngsters to the game of tennis, and along the way taught a lot of life lessons in the process. A very nice, patient man who worked with all these kids. My son was in his summer tennis program for a couple of summers and did so much good work in our community through that program. He is a member of the Wichita Sports Hall of Fame, the United Tennis Association Missouri Valley Hall of Fame, and the tennis facility at McAdams Park is now named in his honor, as well as an open tennis tournament that is held there every year. Unfortunately, Coach Dowdy is deceased, but accepting the award on his behalf is his daughter, Cheryl Dowdy. Cheryl?
Presentation of the Kansas Sports Hall of Fame is brought to you in part by an underwriting grant from...
Programming on Smoky Hill Public Television is made possible in part by an underwriting grant from Nextech, providing the region with clear quality phone service, fast reliable internet, TV service, and wireless phone solutions. Nextech proudly supports public broadcasting and all of its ventures dedicated to improving Kansas communities.
Certainly I am at a stage of my life where I remember virtually all of these people to some degree. I am not quite old enough to have remembered Galen Fiss at the University of Kansas, but certainly I did watch him many times on television as a member of the Cleveland Browns. He has a pretty unique athletic background. I mentioned that there are a few in this class that were standouts in more than one sport, and Galen Fiss was a 3-sport athlete at the University of Kansas, a fullback and linebacker for the football team, but also a very good baseball player who was actually offered a professional baseball contract and signed that with the Cleveland Indians out of college in 1953. That was a time in our history. It was post-Korean War, but in an effort to maintain a strong military, there were a lot of professional athletes that were drafted and served time, interrupting their pro careers at that time, and Galen Fiss was one of those. And after 2 years of service in the Air Force, and he had played part of a season in minor league baseball before going into the military, he decided to sign with the Cleveland Browns and went on to play 11 seasons in the NFL. And at a relatively late stage of his career, was a 2-time Pro Bowl selection in 1962 and 63, and was part of the Browns' 1964 NFL championship team. He is a member of the KU Athletics Hall of Fame and the Cleveland Browns legends. Galen Fiss is deceased. Accepting on his behalf is his grandson, Chris Young, for Galen Fiss. I mentioned earlier that we have some inductees this evening who were involved in starting important traditions at various schools, and our next inductee is one of those. Al Frame graduated from Wichita East High School in 1952. At that same time, Bill Easton, who had built Drake University's track and field program into national prominence and who had been a key in starting the Drake Relays, which to this day remains one of the really prominent track and field events in the United States, had moved to the University of Kansas. And Al Frame was one of his first recruits. And in a time period between 1952 and 1959, the University of Kansas won the conference championships in indoor track, outdoor track, and cross country, all three titles, 8 years in a row. And during Al's varsity career, he was part of 3 of those years and was a big part of it. He was a 3-time All-American in 1954 and 55 in cross country, and also in 1955 in track. He was the 1954 NCAA individual national champion in cross country and helped lead KU to the team championship a year earlier in 1953. He was also very involved in student life. He was president of his senior class, and after serving in the military, went back to KU to receive a law degree. He is a member of the KU Athletics Hall of Fame, the Wichita East Hall of Fame, and now the Kansas Sports Hall of Fame. Please welcome Al Frame.
Very honored and very grateful to be here to receive this award. I note that I last ran 60 years ago. I must assume there was a long and contentious argument as to whether I should be in here. But like I say, I'm glad the decision was finally made. To put matters in perspective, I, of course, am very proud of my accomplishments athletically, but I am most proud of my children and grandchildren. That is what makes me proud now, and intensely proud and continually proud are my children and grandchildren. I'm sure that everyone my age or approaching it feels the same way. However, that being said, I feel like a person at the Academy Awards where goes ahead and thanks everybody in his family, everybody you ever knew, the family dog, the family grand. But I'm not going to do that. However, there are 2 people I'd like to pay real tribute to, and one of them is Fritz Snodgrass, a really good coach, but when you think of Fritz, you think first of all of his kindness and generosity. He is a very kind, gentle man, and that's what you first think of when you think of Fritz. And he was a very giving man. For instance, when I was a junior, we ran and won the medley relay at this state track meet. And he said, Al, since you brought the team from 4th or 5th, whatever it was, and anchored them to first place, well, I'm going to let you take this trophy home. Well, many of you realize at that time the KU track was a cinder track there on 17th Street, and I lived 4 or 5 blocks west of there, and so I was so happy. I ran home, had this trophy I was going to show Mom and Dad, and I fell and I broke the trophy. You know, there's always a man on top of it. Well, he was no longer on top of it. So we got it fixed. Anyway, that's a story. Anyway, my other person that I must give a special tribute to is Bill Easton. His main attribute was, by God, we're going to win. And you don't think of him as a warm personality like Fritz was. But he was a driving force, as other people in here. He was a driving force behind our long-lasting success. I'm going to think of a couple of things here that I remember. Of course, you remember many things, but one time Al Order was back there in Lawrence at the relays, and he said to my daughter Ann, who is the manager of the relays, he said, well, your dad didn't really have much talent. And Al never said anything ungracious in his life, and he was, that didn't come out right. And he went on to say, of course, that my accomplishments were less the result of talent and more the result of just hard work. And I can't disagree with that. Our hard work paid off quite a bit. And the most joyous time when that hard work paid off was the 1953 National Championship. Lloyd Covey was there, Tom Rupp was there, and we were so happy when we found out there at East Lansing that we won the national championship. That those kinds of moments, you look back and think, well, I guess everything was worthwhile. And that was the happiest time of our career that I can remember. And there were other happy times too, other high points, but the hard work certainly paid off, and I'm very appreciative of the board and the Hall of Fame people who have voted me in. I appreciate it very, very much. Thank you.
Presentation of the Kansas Sports Hall of Fame is brought to you in part by an underwriting grant from...
Programming on Smoky Hill Public Television is made possible in part by an underwriting grant from Nextech, providing the region with clear quality phone service, fast reliable internet, TV service, and wireless phone solutions. Nextech proudly supports public broadcasting and all of its ventures dedicated to improving Kansas communities.
Our next inductee is another Kansas native who began a very successful and long coaching career in his home state. He was a native of Girard in southeast Kansas and stayed close to home to graduate from Pittsburgh State University in 1973, and then went into a coaching career which involves success at the high school level, NAIA, NCAA Division II, 1AA, and finally 1A in a 40-year coaching career. 2 Kansas Conference titles at Southwestern, 5 conference titles at Pittsburgh State, 2 at TCU, 7 bowl games, 213 career wins. And I mentioned starting traditions. I had the opportunity to do play-by-play at Pittsburgh State from 1973 to 1976. And the school had had some phenomenal success under Carney Smith in the late 1950s, early 1960s, and then had gone into a little bit of a lull, and Dennis rekindled that tradition and started a run at Pittsburgh State, which led to, in other successive coaches, to a long run as one of the standout Division II programs in the nation for many, many years. But he was the one that got it going again and really got it started, and then, of course, went on to great success at many other places. So please welcome to the Kansas Sports Hall of Fame, Dennis Franchione.
Thank you very much, and a special thank you to the Hall of Fame committee and all the members for this award. It's certainly an honor to be here this evening and very humbling, I have to tell you, and it's very special. And congratulations to the other inductees. How special is this to be a part of this group right here? As I reflect back on my 40 years in coaching, you come to understand that a lot of people had something to do with this. Kind of a team award, really, because of all the people that were a part of it. And fortunately, you have to start with your family, and I was so blessed to have a family that was completely involved in the vision that we had and put up with me and made their sacrifices and enjoyed the great days and were there for the tough days. And you can't do it as a football coach without the whole village on board, and they certainly were there from day one. And I have to say a special thank you to you and all the things that you sacrificed for me. You, when you start to reflect on this, you have to start with the good Lord and His impact on everything, because you don't do anything without Him. I have to tell you, my mom and dad were a big impact, and my mother, she died of cancer without ever seeing me coach a game. And that was very tough. We did surgery. We tried to do everything we could with her. The doctor was exactly right. 6 months later, she would pass away. And really, it became a blessing to know that Mom was going to go to a better place and that we could move on with our life. The difficult part of it was the next day my dad committed suicide. By far. The hardest thing I ever did was bury them the same day. And I was angry. I was disgusted. And I took my anger out on God. And I did that for a long time. And I got through it because of my wonderful wife, who stayed with me, was patient, dealt with my frustrations, helped me a great deal. And then along the way, I met a guy named Ken Horton, who was the director of our FCA at TCU. And Ken explained a lot of things to me and put it in a language that I could understand. Probably at that young age, my foundation with the Lord wasn't strong enough to understand it. And I just felt like, if God is that good, how could something like this happen? But Ken helped me come to grips with it and develop an understanding of it and to deal with it and to forgive. And that was a great feeling for me. My sister later took her life several years later, and you're never prepared for it, but it was much easier because of the relationship with the Lord and the feelings that Ken Horton and Kim had given me to be able to deal with that. So I have to mention them. Now, with that, I have to go back to my wife. My wife, Kim, has been a teammate. She's been awesome through all this. Let me tell you something. You cannot be a successful coach without a great wife. It just does not happen. And she was a teammate through all this. she is probably the finest person that I have ever known, especially putting up with me. But just being a wonderful role model for the kids. She's the most sensitive, caring person I know. She was a rock for anything that happened while I was gone, and heaven knows with recruiting and the late hours that you put in and coaching, she was certainly a great part of that. And with her came a great mother-in-law and father-in-law, and Kenny Krause and Marisha. And we lost Kenny a while back, but what a role model he was, and he was perfect for me at that point in my life with male adult leadership and the things that I needed. And I have to thank Marisha. I don't know how many nights I was on the phone at her house calling recruits or taking phone calls from recruits or calling coaches and throwing the phone against the wall when I lost somebody. She lived through that one night, but I ended up getting him, so it wasn't a total loss. My daughter Libby is here this evening. All my kids couldn't make it for various reasons, Ashley and Brad, but Libby's here, and it's not easy to be coaches' kids. In fact, Libby would tell you the story of one place we coached at that she was taking calls from her friends in the third quarter saying, your dad needs to change quarterbacks. She did not have a hotline to me, as they may have thought, but and then all the moves that they went through, all the sacrifices they make. I love you, honey. I love all the things that you put into this, and very special. And then my other kids too. And my favorite picture is with Ashley and Libby, and they got their uniform on game day, and they got their eye black on. And that's my favorite picture ever of those two girls, and I always remember that. I didn't have a brother. I told you about my sister. But my nephew, Joe Clark, was as close as it gets to being my brother. And we lost Joe last spring, but he lived every day with my coaching career. He was always somebody that I could talk to. And sometimes when you're a head coach, you don't have a lot of people to talk to or ask questions about. But Joe was always there. He was a great one. His wife, KRISTI, came this evening. I certainly want to thank her, and my niece, Glenna, and my nephew, Mike, came a long way here to be a part of this, and they've certainly been a major part of everything in my life. Kim's sisters, Deb, and her husband, Dennis, are here. They actually lived in College Station for a few years while I was coaching at A&M, so they got a first-hand look at what the life was like. Her other sister, Marcia, and Lance are here, and they were certainly great supporters through thick and thin, and some days when you're coaching, there's some thin days too, so there's no doubt about that. Our best friends are here this evening that came a long way, Rick and Georgianne Senek, and Kim and I have been married for 40 years this summer. Rick and Georgianne and I got married 1 week apart. They were in our wedding, we were in their wedding, and this summer we celebrated our 40th wedding anniversary together, which was really, really special. There's too many of all the family that are here to mention them all, but thank you. Thank you for all the support down through the years, everything you've done. Couldn't have done it without you. I have to mention the coaches in my life, and I love coaches. I love them. I love what they do for young people, and I was so blessed to be around great coaches throughout my career that brought me up the right way. John Brown is here with his wife Judy tonight. We coached in high school together. We got to a state championship at Peabody High School. We didn't win it, but it was a lot of fun, and it was a great run and a great ride, and we had a great football team, and John has been a friend and mentor to me forever, and there's no doubt about that. I got my start in college coaching at Kansas State University with a guy named Jim Dickey. He hired me. When I went to Kansas State, they hadn't won a conference game in 3 years. We won 4 the first year, and everybody fired that coach immediately as soon as we beat them. It was a fun ride, and we're sorry to see those go, but I was so blessed, and I had guys like Coach Dickey and Jim Davey from here in Wichita Southeast, and Gary Darnell, Jim Donnan, Carl Silmer that brought me up the right way, taught me ethics, morals in coaching, how to do it the right way, not to break the rules, and to do it with pride and class. And that was really a break for me. I came up a different way in coaching, and I was very loyal to my assistant coaches, and they were loyal to me. I had some coaches with me for 15 years, which is very unusual, and a lot of them for 10 years plus. And so I'm very grateful for all of them. Finally, I have to mention the players. I have a lot of them that came this evening, and that's really neat to know that, though they make me feel old when they tell me how old they are right now. I love the game of football. I love what the game of football does for young people. I always felt like my job was to take young people where they couldn't take themselves, academically, athletically, socially, and even spiritually. And I had to win some games along the way. That was understood. But I really thought of myself as a teacher. My classroom was the football field, and I taught life skills. I taught teamwork, esprit de corps, sacrifice, dedication, commitment, work ethic, all those different things. And as you go through 40 years and you reflect back, you hope you made a difference in some of their lives. And I know now as I see some of them again, I know that that's happened. And I have some guys here from Peabody here tonight, Jeff Moore and his wife Carrie, and Bruce Snelling and his wife Sherry. Jeff Malott, I think, came all the way from Colorado. Those guys were great players. And Jeff and Bruce have gone on to become some of the best friends I have in life. We get together every summer, play golf, tell stories, and have a few beverages as we're doing it. And it's great to be with them. Ed Kingsley's here this evening that played for me. So I can't tell you guys enough how much it meant, and hopefully I touched every player's life. That's the goal of a coach. Again, thank you for this award. It means a lot to me. It means a lot to have a chance to stand up here and tell my story and to thank all my family. So thanks again. Very honored and very humble. Appreciate it.
Our next induction will also be a posthumous induction. Dean Kelly, another small-town Kansas kid. I don't know how many of you are old enough to remember when the classifications in the state were AA, A, B, and BB. Those were the four sizes of schools, and Dean Kelly was part of a state championship team at Class B McCune in 1949. He went on to the University of Kansas and was a starter on the Jayhawks' first ever national championship team in 1952. The other four starters on that team were all seniors, and the following year, Kansas was picked fourth in the Big Seven Conference, but they won it, and then they went to the NCAA tournament, and they weren't expected to do much there, and lo and behold, they were back in the national championship game and lost by 1 point to Indiana in the championship. Dean was joined in the starting lineup by his younger brother Al, who has previously been inducted into this Hall of Fame, and another Kansan, B.H. Bourne from Medicine Lodge, who was a little-used backup to Clyde Lovellette the year before and became an All-American himself. It says in the notes that Dean Kelly is the only player from the University of Kansas to be named to the NCAA All-Tournament team twice. I can go you one better than that. He is the only player in history from any school to be named to the NCAA Tournament All-Tournament team after having averaged under 10 points per game in each of those two seasons. And what that tells you is it's easy to look at somebody and go, well, they average 25 points a game, they got to be All-Tournament. Dean Kelly stood out with his leadership, his playmaking, his defense, all the intangibles that are part of a championship team. He played on the 1952 U.S. Olympic team that won the gold medal at Helsinki as part of that KU championship team, and then played in the 1955 Pan American Games, winning a gold medal as a member of the Peoria Caterpillars. And I actually got a chance to see Dean and Allen and B.H. Bourne play for the Peoria Cats against the Wichita Vickers when I was still a very young man. Accepting for Dean Kelly is his wife, Hilda Kelly Frankman. Dean Kelly to the Kansas Sports Hall of Fame.
Presentation of the Kansas Sports Hall of Fame is brought to you in part by an underwriting grant from...
Programming on Smoky Hill Public Television is made possible in part by an underwriting grant from Nextech, providing the region with clear quality phone service, vast reliable internet, TV service, and wireless phone solutions. Nextech proudly supports public broadcasting and all of its ventures dedicated to improving Kansas communities.
I have never had the opportunity to meet this next gentleman, but his name is certainly well known to me. I mentioned that I had an opportunity to do play-by-play for a few years for Pittsburgh State. And John played on the 1957 NAIA National Championship team at Pittsburgh State that was coached by Carney Smith. When I got there in the 1970s, Carney was the athletic director, and the football staff, Tom Lester, Joe Murphy, who was the line coach there forever, Bill Samuels, all had a long history, having played or coached at Pittsburgh State. And John Levera's name came up a lot in discussions. His knowledge of football, what a great guy he was. And they would often remember John Levera used to say, it really did come up a lot. And you look at his resume, and again, 40 years as a football coach, starting at little schools, McCune, Kansas, Kansas City, Washington, then New Mexico Highlands, Stephen F. Austin. He was an assistant at Kansas, coached in the CFL as an assistant with the BC Lions, and then over 20 years as an assistant in the NFL under coaches like Mike Ditka, Bum Phillips, Wade Phillips, and Dennis Green. Another truly outstanding coaching career that started in a very small town in southeast Kansas. I'd like to know when John comes up here, because when I was in Pittsburgh, one of the traditions in the area, Arma, which by that time was Northeast Arma, where John's from, played Girard in the final, or Frontenac, sorry. Arma played Frontenac. Last game of the football season every year, they played the game, and then the stands emptied, and they had a big fight in the middle of the field. That was one of the traditions. I'd like to know if that goes back as far as John. But please welcome John Levera to the Kansas Sports Hall of Fame.
Thank you very much. The fighting on Thanksgiving Day between the Arma and Frontenac football teams in the 50s was true. All the fans drank a lot of bootleg whiskey on the sidelines. The game went in, and there would be fisticuffs. Whoever lost got the worst of it. But I can't tell you how thankful I am to be here this evening. I feel really darn blessed and honored. I'm from a small town. I wasn't a good football player at Pittsburgh State. I played. The year we won the national championship, which they mentioned in 57, I played one quarter in the last game that counted because we beat Tahlequah to finish undefeated and to go to the national championship. And I played three quarters, but one of our players got his tooth knocked out and they wouldn't let him play, and I had to play, and we still won. It was amazing. But I want to thank the committee and everybody for my selection. This is really nice. I have like each person that's been up here, I have a wonderful family. Almost all of them are here this evening. My wife, Rosie, of nearly 60 years. And my son's here from Los Angeles, and he has a wonderful wife, and we have two wonderful grandchildren. My wife, Rosie, is from Lamar. Our daughter, Gina, is here. My wife's sister, Carol, is here. My cousin from Arma, Kansas, Judy, her name was Leverett, now Haas, and Don Haas are here. I have high school teammates, Bill Zauger and his wife are here, and Sandy and their daughter, a teammate at Pittsburgh State. In fact, I can tell you a quick story. The first day I went to practice at Pittsburgh State, I weighed 135 in high school when I graduated, and I wasn't a running back or a wide receiver. I was a guard and a linebacker. That's bad. Anyway, the first day at practice, Eldon Danaher, who's in our Hall of Fame, was a great player in professional football after Pittsburgh State, blocked me about 10 yards, but he was kind enough to pick me up and carry me back to the line of scrimmage. I'll never forget that. That was my rude awakening to college football. But I feel fortunate, and I'm going to hurry. But during high school in Arma and grade school, we had a wonderful coach in grade school named Estel Gilmore. In high school, we had Harry McDonald and Lefty Ham. And while Harry was the head coach in football, they won 40 in a row. My friend Bill Zauger was on the team. His wife Sandy's here, but we got our first 15, then they won 25 more. And then after leaving Arma, I went to Pittsburgh State and played for Carney Smith. He's in our Hall of Fame, deservedly so. He was so far ahead of his time. football-wise, it was unbelievable. We don't have time, but I could tell you things that he told me as a freshman in college at Pittsburgh State that we would someday be doing in coaching the game of football. They were totally different than what we were doing then, and he was correct. It has happened. Carney was brilliant. Joe Murphy was a great line coach, and I had a wonderful college career at the school, so I'm thankful for that. As a young coach, Dean and Alan Kelly, I saw Dean and Alan play when I was in junior high in Pittsburgh, Kansas. They were 6 points behind with 30 seconds to go in a regional basketball game, and they won. That's hard to do. It was incredible. And then I ended up coaching McCune, and during grade school I played against the younger son, Larry, and coached at McCune for 2 years and enjoyed that. And then I went to Washington High and had a great career at Washington High. We had so much fun, had great players. Some of them played collegiately after leaving high school. Then from there I got into college coaching at a school you've never heard of called New Mexico Highlands University in Las Vegas, New Mexico. How many of you have heard of that? Gilbert. We got one player, Gilbert Alvarez. He's heard of it. He's here. Gilbert, I appreciate it. But anyway, then I coached in college for a long time in small colleges and had a lot of fun. Had a lot of great players. The only way you win is with great players, and we had a lot of them, and I felt very fortunate. When the time or the chance or the opportunity came to go in the NFL, Bum Phillips called me. I'm going to take that back. I called him. He had just been fired as the head coach of the Houston Oilers, and we were good friends because his son Wade had coached at Kansas while I was at Kansas, and we were good friends, and then Wade went on with his daddy in 1976. But when Bum got fired in New Orleans, I called him to tell him how badly I felt for him. He said, John, he said, it's not a problem. He said, I'm going to be the head coach of the New Orleans Saints. He said, you want to go with us? I said, what do you mean? He said, well, they wouldn't let our running back coach out of his contract in Houston, so I can't take Andy Bourgeois to New Orleans with me. I want you, Wade, and I want you to go. I said, well, yeah, I guess so. That was my interview. That's pretty good, you know. I was smart enough to say yes. I called Rosie. I was coaching in Vancouver, Canada at the time, and I was in Dallas when I called Bum, but I called Rosie and told her we're moving to New Orleans. She was all excited about that because we just moved from Denton, Texas to Vancouver, and now we're going back to New Orleans. We're in a path in the highway, but got to New Orleans. I was lucky to stay there 5 years with Bum and coach some great players, and then I went on the rest of my career, which is in the program. I don't need to read that to you, but I've had a wonderful life. I've got a wonderful family, a lot of great and wonderful friends, and I've really enjoyed myself to this point in my lifetime, and I plan to continue. I'm going to turn 80 tomorrow, and I got to keep cranking it up. You know, there's a lot of games to be seen yet, and a lot of games to go to. So, with that, I'll close and just say, I can't tell you how much I appreciate this. And Dennis, you were great. I love to see Pittsburgh State guys do good, and he's a Pittsburgh Stater, and so I'll just say thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your evening, and God bless.
Our next inductee had every intention of being here this evening and, in fact, was at an earlier event today, signing autographs and so forth. But Don Locke's health has not been real good lately, and that earlier event just kind of left him spent. And so he is not here, but I have no problem in talking about this gentleman. Don Locke was one of those multi-sport athletes, and at Wichita State not only was a standout baseball player, which became his eventual professional career, but was a two-year starter on the basketball team and a double-figure scorer as a senior in the 1957-58 season. That was about the time that I was really starting to get interested in sports. And Don Locke, being a local guy, was one of the first names that I knew. And as I got older and had other associations with Wichita State, it was really a thrill for me to get to meet guys like Linwood Sexton and Cleo Littleton and Don Locke. And Don, like the others, has always been tremendously kind to me, willing to talk about his career. He's just a great guy, and that'll be echoed by anybody you talk to about Don Locke. The Wichita State baseball program under Gene Stevenson, Don took an interest in it, would come around. I know the coaches at Wichita State would tell you he was just a great guy to talk to and to have come by, and they appreciated his support. He was signed by the Yankees out of Wichita State, who signed a lot of players from this area. As Dick Sanders, previous Hall of Fame inductee who's here, can tell you, that was a tough organization to come up in when you got guys like Mickey Mantle and Hank Bauer and Elston Howard and others ahead of you on the major league team. And Don got a break by going in the expansion draft and ended up with the Washington Senators. Played 8 seasons in the major leagues. Twice he was among the top 10 in home runs in the American League. And as a center fielder one year, led the American League in outfield assists and putouts. Fine all-around athlete, but an even better guy. And to accept for him, his son Darren will accept the plaque for Don Locke in the Kansas Sports Hall of Fame.
Presentation of the Kansas Sports Hall of Fame is brought to you in part by an underwriting grant from...
Programming on Smoky Hill Public Television is made possible in part by an underwriting grant from Nextech, providing the region with clear quality phone service, fast reliable internet, TV service, and wireless phone solutions. Nextech proudly supports public broadcasting and all of its ventures dedicated to improving Kansas communities.
Our next inductee is another who excelled in a couple of different areas. A graduate of Coffeyville's Field Kindley High School in 1957. He coached high school basketball for 12 years at Beeler and Hope High Schools, then became the head women's basketball coach at Cloud County Community College in 1977. And that was an era when women's sports were just starting to come into acceptance. A lot of schools were just starting programs for women in various sports. And in addition to coaching the women's basketball team, he coached the men's baseball team for 3 years. At Cloud, won 3 Region 6 championships and finished as the national tournament runner-up in 1980. He moved from there to Barton County Community College, has the most wins in Barton County history, was a charter inductee into their Sports Hall of Fame, won 6 Region 6 championships and 11 conference titles at Barton. His combined collegiate coaching record at the junior college level here in Kansas, 465 and 104. Jerry McCarty into the Kansas Sports Hall of Fame. Jerry?
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy, for your kind words. I'm sure you're probably looking forward to Shock basketball. I figured he was. That's why he's here tonight, so he can kind of get his voice tuned up for that. I also would like to take this time to thank the Kansas Sports Hall of Fame, the Board of Trustees and Directors, and Mr. Pullen for their efforts regarding this prestigious organization. I am humbled to be part of the class of 2017 inductees. I'm incredibly humbled. And if Jordan was up here right now and he saw me walk up with this here clipboard, he'd probably faint, because I was the one that I talked to him about. Now, do I just have to talk about 8 minutes? He said, yes, 8 minutes. So I'll give him my best effort. The good Lord has blessed me with many blessings over the years. I'd like to share briefly some of these blessings. The first one of those blessings was acknowledging him as my head coach. Now, that may sound kind of weird, but it's not. That's what I grew up around, and that's part of me. And I was fortunate enough to have great parents. And my brother Larry, myself, we grew up with parents that spent a lot of time talking about values, morals, discipline, and the competitive spirit. And I can remember in the 50s, my dad coached a semi-pro baseball team, and they used to come here to Wichita and play in that national tournament. And So I watched him manage, and I kind of got that spirit in me as I grew older, and I began to think, you know what? That may be something that I want to do one day. So as life kind of went along its journey, I began to think about that was going to be my gift to get into coaching. So that's what I wanted to do, and they were very instrumental in having that happen. My late wife, Kathleen, she was the love of my life. She was the epitome of a coach's wife. She loved the Lord. She was my best friend. She was a great mother, a great grandmother, and spoiled her grandkids tremendously. She was a great communicator, and she loved sports. And did I mention that she was the love of my life and my best friend? And she was also my top assistant. We have two sons, Tim McCarty and his wife, Jillian. They have two daughters, Bailey and Kendall. Tim has been coaching football for 34 years and is currently the head football coach at East Central University in Ada, Oklahoma. My younger son, Dr. Terry McCarty, and his wife, Lisa. Terry has two children, Trevor and Tristan. Terry currently serves as a superintendent of schools in Perry, Oklahoma. He has been in education for 28 years. I'm extremely proud of both of my sons. Their investment in young people and in making a difference every day is a key to their particular profession. Family, friends, and administrators, staff, assistant coaches, and athletes, I cannot thank you enough for all that you have done in my life. I could spend several minutes talking about each one of these areas, but if you're involved in athletics, and I was an athletic director for 15 years too. There's a lot of time involved in sports, and usually when we had a basketball game, I was the next to last to leave the gymnasium. The janitor was the last, and I was the next last. So you spend a lot of time away from home, and I think Dennis said that a while ago. And I think these things are important things that we need to be thinking about with the people that we are associated with every day. And it doesn't make any difference whether it's your job or if it's coaching or whatever you're doing. These people are all part of our livelihood. And so when I talk about these things, I have a great understanding of the things that they've done for me. I know that Dana was my administrative assistant at Barton County. Spent a lot of times probably correcting errors that I made, probably making things go better for me. It was just an incredible time for me to have someone that had that responsibility. And I had Jill Shields as a player, and her name was already mentioned. Jill played for me at Barton County. There's a kind of a little story I'd like to insert real quick. She played for me, came out her sophomore year. She transferred to Barton, and in spring basketball, we had workouts every day, and she would come and work out. The week before we started our season, she tore her knee up and was done for the year. But she persevered with that particular accident and continued to go through school, not playing her sophomore year. So she decided she was going to transfer it, and she decided a little bit later on, she had a great tournament at our place at Barton County. And she come to my office and she said, "You know what, Coach? I'm staying." She had enough hours to transfer and be a junior, but she stayed and endured that. And that's just an awesome feeling when you have that happen with a young lady that says those kind of things with your program. And I felt bad for her, but yet she went on ahead and played throughout her remainder years. And, of course, now she's at K-State. I had a lot of great assistant coaches. I'd like to just tell a lot of stories about a lot of them, but I will share one here. Miege High is sitting somewhere off over here. Saw her just a second or an hour ago. And Mick was my first recruit that I'd ever recruited at Cloud County. And she went on ahead and graduated and played for 2 years at Cloud, and went to Bethany and graduated from there, got into coaching, and all she did was just win a state title at Grinnell. And so I talked her in to come to Barton County to be my assistant. And you got it. She came to Barton County, and she was a great assistant. And so when we have those kind of people, and all of us have dealt with youngsters, you feel how lucky you have really been. And I really have been blessed. I got Jim Downing right here. Played baseball for me at Cloud County. Now, he looks like a second baseman, and he is a second baseman, and he was a good second baseman. And I just ran into him today. I thought I recognized the name, and then when I saw him this afternoon, I'm going, oh my goodness. Now I know how old I really am. I want to share one little quick story with you. In 1970, I was at Hope, Kansas. I was a young coach, been coaching about 5 years. And usually in the middle of August, they have a coaches clinic in Topeka, Kansas. And of course, I went to them every year they had them. And so that year I decided, yep, this is going to be a good one to go to. The keynote speaker that particular coach's clinic was none other than Coach John Wooden. And I'm thinking, that's the legendary Coach John Wooden. Well, the story begins almost 47 years ago. I went to that clinic that day. I got up early in the morning, and I got up probably at 6, and I went to eat breakfast at about 6:45. So I walked into the restaurant. Obviously, at 7:15, there's not going to be a lot of people in the restaurant eating. And I looked down towards the end of the restaurant area there, and sitting in the booth, you guessed it, Coach John Wooden. And I go, oh my goodness, I've got to go talk to that guy. So, oh me, I buzzed down there. And as I get close to him, we make eye contact. I stick out my hand and I introduce myself to him, and we talked just a little bit. He says, Jerry, would you like to sit down? I think I was already seated when he said that. So I got to sit down with the legend. And we got to talking a little bit about sports, and he said, Jerry, where are you coach at? And I told him at Hope High School in Hope, Kansas. And he said, how long have you been coaching? And I said, well, I'm kind of a snot-nosed kid, about 5 years. Well, he said, let me tell you, there are key things that you want to remember. And he said key things are be very fundamentally sound in everything that you do. So whenever you present your team with any type of drills, that you do it correctly. And don't don't change. Stay with the course. And then he told me, he said, Jerry said, by the way, he said, I have this pyramid of success. It's a very important thing for me, or for him at that time, to follow. And as I look at that pyramid of success, what I saw on the very bottom line was key things that we have all done sometime in our life. If you're in business, you're going to do some of this. Enthusiasm, leadership, these are key elements that he had on the very baseline. He didn't have anything about basketball, but he really drilled that into his players. And as he worked up that pyramid, at the very top of the apex of that pyramid, he said, faith and prayer. He and his wife Nellie were committed to their lives as Kathleen and I were. As he was sitting there, I noticed he was writing, and I'm thinking, what's he writing? I'm thinking, well, maybe he's getting ready to make a statement to his upcoming audience that he was going to be dealing with. I got ready to leave, and he handed me this piece of paper. And on it said, may your individual future in basketball be tremendous, and your future be better. John Wooden, UCLA. I got to visit with him for 30 minutes that morning. So you talk about a coach having an impact on a little young coach, you're looking at him. You talk about a person that has done it all, he has done it all. So you see, I have many blessings to be thankful for through my life. And tonight I am truly blessed again. Thank you, and God bless each of you. Thank you.
Presentation of the Kansas Sports Hall of Fame is brought to you in part by an underwriting grant from...
Programming on Smoky Hill Public Television is made possible in part by an underwriting grant from Nextech, providing the region with clear quality phone service, fast reliable internet, TV service, and wireless phone solutions. Nextech proudly supports public broadcasting and all of its ventures dedicated to improving Kansas communities.
Unlike a number of our inductees tonight, Priscilla Gary-Sweeney is not a Kansas native, but she certainly made a major impact once she got here. Native of Tennessee, she began her collegiate career at Southwest Tennessee Community College, and some 35-plus years later still holds the career scoring record at that school. She moved from there to Kansas State, was a two-time All-Big 8 selection in 1982 and 83, and this is another one of those tradition starters. The Kansas State women's program was just starting to come to prominence then, and she became Kansas State's first female basketball All-American, averaged over 18 points a game for her 2 seasons there, led them to back-to-back Big 8 titles, 2 consecutive NCAA tournaments, an Elite 8 in 1982 and a Sweet 16 in 1983. She is a member of the Kansas State Athletic Hall of Fame. Her number 10 was retired in 2009. Please welcome Priscilla Gary-Sweeney.
How everybody doing tonight? First of all, I just want to thank my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, for without him, none of this would have been possible for me. Secondly, I would like to thank my wife, Eva Cooper, my 2 children, Tellis and Alicia, my father, my daddy is up there, my stepmom, and my aunties. All of them saw fit to follow me from Memphis, Tennessee on Friday for this most important event, okay? I know a lot of you all are looking at me right now, and you're saying, well, she's short. Yes, I am. And I'm getting shorter by the year, okay? And I just want to tell you all the story on how I got to Kansas State. I was playing basketball. We were in a tournament at Southwest Community College. And the assistant coach was in Memphis to see another young lady to play high school ball. And it was just my luck that evening that the coach at this high school said, well, if you really want to see a ball player, you need to go over to Shelby State, Southwest Community College. And the funny thing was she came, she saw me play, they got tapes and everything, and I got a call from the track coach. I'm like, track? Sir, I don't run track. All right, and then about 2 weeks later, I got another call from the volleyball coach. I'm like, I don't play volleyball. Okay, well, you know, they was going to offer me full rides, and I'm like, really? So then the basketball coach called me. I'm like, whoa, what took you so long? I mean, I've been waiting up here for a month for you to call, and I'm getting called from everybody but you know. But she called me. I came to Kansas State, and I never thought I would be here talking to you all. I started my career. Every summer, my mom would take me down to Mississippi to visit with my grandmother for a couple of months out the summer. And that's where I honed my skills. At 7 and 8 years old, I was playing basketball with the guys. I've always played basketball with the guys. So, but doing that helped me hone my skills. Once I left Kansas State, I went into the military. I did 27 years active duty, retired in 2015. And one of the things that I took from Kansas State to the military was always be true to yourself. And I've always been true to myself. And I'm glad that you all saw fit to induct me into this Hall of Fame. It just brings closure to my basketball career. 35, 40 odd years ago, I never played the game of sports to be inducted to anything. I played the sport because I loved it. And now I don't watch it anymore, but I loved it back then. But I don't watch it anymore right now. But I'm glad that I had that opportunity to play at Kansas State. A story about Jordan. When Jordan called me, he left a message on my cell phone. And I went home, I told my wife, I said, this man left a message on my cell phone. I don't believe him. He said something about the Kansas Hall of Fame. I'm like, So I called Katie at Kansas State. I said, Katie, what do you know about this guy named Jordan? Well, yeah, we nominated you to be inducted. I said, oh, okay, well, I guess I need to call him back then, huh? She said, yeah. I want to thank you all for having me here. And one thing I would like to say, please keep the victims of Hurricane Harvey, Hurricane Emma, and Hurricane Maria, and the earthquake that just happened in Mexico. Please keep those people in your prayers. I will be leaving here sometime at the end of the year or either beginning of next year, and I will be deploying to Puerto Rico. Okay, so please keep those people in your prayers. Thank you.
Presentation of the Kansas Sports Hall of Fame is brought to you in part by an underwriting grant from...
Programming on Smoky Hill Public Television is made possible in part by an underwriting grant from Nextech, providing the region with clear quality phone service, fast reliable internet, TV service, and wireless phone solutions. Nextech proudly supports public broadcasting and all of its ventures dedicated to improving Kansas communities.
Our next inductee is once again a standout in many areas. First and best known probably for basketball. He came out of Wellington High School and was a member of KU's 1950 Big Seven conference title winners, and that was kind of the forerunner. Clyde Lovellette was a sophomore that year. That was the beginning of their run to the national championship 2 years later. Unfortunately, Jerry came up 1 year short of getting to play on that team, but was the captain of the 1951 team. Went into coaching at Emporia State, then was an assistant to Dick Harp at Kansas from 1957 to 1960 with some great teams. And during that time became, for the first time of a number of times during his career, the golf coach at Kansas, coached both the men's and women's teams. He also has served as the assistant AD for Olympic sports at Kansas, became an accomplished golfer himself, and has served a term as president of the Kansas Golf Association. Among his accomplishments in that sport, 9 holes in one. 9. There are plenty of guys on the PGA Tour that would love to come anywhere close to that. He is a member of the Kansas Golf Hall of Fame and the KU Booth Athletics Hall of Fame, and now the Kansas Sports Hall of Fame, Jerry Waugh from Wellington, Kansas.
Thank you. I never could get anything done. Didn't finish the hole-in-ones. Never could win the state championship. Never could do all those things, but had a great voyage. I want to thank the Hall for nominating me and bringing me up here. I've had a wonderful life in sport. Now, I came here to speak and you came here to listen. If you get through before I do, it's getting late. I'll understand. I want to thank the Kansas Sports Hall of Fame for including me in this year's honorees. I came from a small town south of Wichita, Wellington. We had great sports. Kids, I remember as a small kid, Friday night was a big night in Wellington because we played football in the fall, basketball, track. We didn't have baseball in my day. That was something that I really missed. But it was a great town in which to grow. I could play golf in the morning. I could swim in the afternoon, carry my papers at 4 o'clock, the Wellington Daily News. So I lived the life of Wellington, Kansas. But very pleased to have grown up in that town. Was fortunate enough to go to the university where I played some basketball. But I would like to read to you The Bridge Builder. An old man traveling a lone highway came to an evening cold and gray, to a chasm deep and wide. The old man crossed in a twilight dim, for the sullen stream held no fear for him. For he turned when he reached the other side and built a bridge to span the tide. "Old man," cried a fellow pilgrim near, "your journey will end with the ending day, and you never again will pass this way. You have crossed the chasm deep and wide. Why build a bridge at eventide?" And the builder raised his old gray head. Good friend, on the path I have come, he said, there followeth after me today a youth whose feet will pass this way. To that fair-haired boy may a pitfall be. He too must cross in the twilight dim. Good friend, I'm building this bridge for him. To the bridge builders of my life, Gage Saran, my high school coach, and Artie Hall. Paul Gallen, my basketball coach. But more than anyone else, Joe and Camilla Wall, my parents. I share this award with them. Thank you.
We'll step over here and take a picture.
Presentation of the Kansas Sports Hall of Fame is brought to you in part by an underwriting grant from
Programming on Smoky Hill Public Television is made possible in part by an underwriting grant from Nextech, providing the region with clear quality phone service, fast reliable internet, TV service, and wireless phone solutions. Nextech proudly supports public broadcasting and all of its ventures dedicated to improving Kansas communities.
Our final inductee is someone that I certainly got to know well during his collegiate career. I have had the distinct pleasure of being the play-by-play broadcaster for Wichita State for now 38 years, and in that time, there have been two student athletes that I had an opportunity to witness who led by just the sheer force of their personality. One was Xavier McDaniel in basketball, and the other, who came along just a couple of years later, was Eric Wedge. The 1989 Wichita State National Championship team had a number of outstanding players, all of whom were leaders in their own way, but Eric Wedge was the single strongest personality and driving force on that team. He was so dedicated, played so hard, was so intense, that his teammates, I think, were literally afraid to face him if they didn't give the same type of effort that he did every single day. And that was a team that got into postseason play and had a couple of really major injuries. They got to the College World Series. They won a game and then lost to Florida State. Came back through the losers bracket, had to play Florida State again, had to beat them twice to get to the championship game. And in the first of those meetings, Wichita State was behind but had begun to rally, had men on base, and the rain broke loose. And it was about an hour rain delay. Eric Wedge was at the plate when the rain delay occurred, and on the first pitch after the rain delay, he lined a single up the middle to put Wichita State ahead. They went ahead to win that game and the next one and went on to win the national championship. After that game, I was in the interview room as Eric was up on the podium, and one of the reporters asked him about the pressure in that situation coming up after the rain delay. And he said, "Pressure? I live for those situations. I thrive on those situations. If you don't want to be up there in those situations, you shouldn't play the game." And the guy from Baseball America sitting next to me said, "Is he always that intense?" And I said, "Always." That was him. It is him today. He has had a successful major league managerial career. He was the keynote speaker at Wichita State's first pitch dinner one year, and when he got through, guys that were current major leaguers attending the event were ready to jump up and go out in the January snow and play. He had them so fired up. So it is a great pleasure, and I have had a chance to see him inducted into several halls of fame now. Eric Wedge into the Kansas Sports Hall of Fame.
Well, I don't know what I'm supposed to say after listening to everybody else tonight. So if you guys were expecting something spectacular, you need to back off a little bit, all right? It's an honor to be here. It's great to see Mike here. We go back a long way. Thank you to the Kansas Sports Hall of Fame. Congratulations to all the inductees. I figured I should have pushed this back, or they should have pushed this back 5 or 6 years, because I've got a lot of work to do. Listen to all the stories of all the other inductees and their life experiences and everything they've gone through. So what a pleasure. Let's give them all a nice round of a hand, because they're very well, very well. I've been very fortunate in my career to be surrounded by a lot of good people. It starts with my mom and dad, who are here tonight, coming here and playing for Wichita State, Gene Stevenson, Brent Kemitz, who are both here tonight. So many other coaches, players, people that are instrumental in my life to help me be a big part of who I am. And I'm 49 years old. I feel like I've got a lot left to do. I know that I do. I know that I will. But it's inspiring to listen to some of the people that were up here tonight and the way they've lived their lives and what's been important to them and just the code that they live by. And I'm a big believer in that. I'm with the Toronto Blue Jays now, and I'm in charge of their minor league system. It's one of the most gratifying jobs I've ever had. In charge of 200 young players, 50 staff members, academies from the Dominican all the way to AAA in Buffalo, New York. And to have the opportunity to impact lives, with leadership, by living by that code, is something that I believe in and will always believe in. And we don't just want these young men to be successful baseball players. We want them to be successful human beings. We want them to understand what it means to be a good son, to eventually be a good husband, to eventually understand what it means to be a good father, and hopefully a grandfather, and on and on and on. All right? And to pay back in life, pay back in the game of baseball. One thing we always talk to these kids about, and I believe in this, listen, when you leave the game, you've got to leave the game a little bit better than it was when you came in. Because if you don't do that, then you're not living up to your end of the bargain. And that was something that, I believe that happened at Wichita State. Lauren Hibbs, who was an assistant coach at the time, I think he's still at the head coach at UNC Charlotte, I believe. I remember being at the Pizza Hut. Hell, everybody goes to the Pizza Hut when you come into town, right? So I'm at the Pizza Hut, my recruiting trip, and I said, listen, all I want to know is if you guys can help me reach my potential. That's all I want to know. I want you to look me in the eye and tell me that. If you can do that, I'm all in. And he did. And I would say that it worked out well for Wichita State. I know that it worked out well for me. And I know that the program that we've had here is something that's been a sense of pride for the city of Wichita and the state of Kansas for a long time. When I think back to that 1989 season, I believe we were the first national championship baseball team to go to the White House, I think, because of the Doles. I don't think there was anybody prior to us because the Doles, were able to make that happen. And or knowing Gene, he talked somebody into it because he was really good at doing that too. But ultimately, we got to go to the White House, and just thinking about those life experiences, thinking about that point in time, and a bunch of young kids not knowing what's ahead of us, it's something that I'll never forget. And the way the town embraced us as a national championship team, it wasn't just our small group of guys. It was the city of Wichita. It was the state of Kansas. You know what? It was the university, it was baseball, but it was all of us together. And the fact that it's had legs for 25 plus years and still meaningful to so many people, in this city, but in the state of Kansas as well. And what it meant to college baseball at the time, I think that we can't forget that. That was something that's a great sense of pride for all of us. So Wichita means a lot to me, always has, always will. Wichita State University is a big part of who I am, and the state of Kansas is a big part of who I am. My brother and his family are here. They're living here. I tell you, I enjoy coming back here. I enjoy seeing people I haven't seen for a long time, and I'll always be a part of this community. I'll always be a part of Wichita State University. I'm proud to be up here tonight. I'm proud to be here along with all these other inductees and everybody that chose to come out here tonight. Thank you very much.
Presentation of the Kansas Sports Hall of Fame is brought to you in part by an underwriting grant from...
Programming on Smoky Hill Public Television is made possible in part by an underwriting grant from Nextech, providing the region with clear quality phone service, fast reliable internet, TV service, and wireless phone solutions. Nextech proudly supports public broadcasting and all of its ventures dedicated to improving Kansas communities.
I just want to say thanks to all of you for coming. Certainly those of you who particularly came to support particular inductees. I know it means a lot to them, and we all, when we get to attend these things, get a little extra special benefit out of it, because you never know until someone gets up here and starts talking about people they love and people that have been important in their lives and moments that were special to them. It gets emotional, it gets very special, and we thank all the inductees for allowing us to share those moments tonight. One last piece of business, I would like to ask all of the inductees or the people who accepted for the inductees to please come back up with the plaques, and we'll take one last group photo before we wrap things up. Again, congratulations to all of our inductees, and thanks again to all of you for making a special night.
The members of the Board of Trustees, directors, and members of the selection committee have deemed you worthy of induction into the Kansas Sports Hall of Fame. You now join 260 previously inducted members of this hallowed group. Through your participation in sports, you have brought pride and honor to yourself, your community, and to the entire state of Kansas. You have gained the respect and admiration of Kansans, and your accomplishments both on and off the field of competition has helped build our state's lasting athletic heritage. To make certain the memory of your accomplishment endures and as a lasting source of inspiration for future generations, the Board of Trustees and the directors now declare that you're officially inducted into the Kansas Sports Hall of Fame. Congratulations.
This has been a production of Smoky Hills Public Television, the Kansas Association of Broadcasters non-metro station of the year for 2 years running.